Vertica, we are live.
So I'm glad to welcome all of you to this very special session. The Embassy of India, Bucharest, Surfaces Reporter Magazine India, and CPK welcomes you to the live session. The tale of two capital cities, New Delhi and Tirana. A discussion between Managing Principal CPK, Architect Dikshu Kukreja, and Ms. Anuela Ristani, Deputy Mayor of Tirana, Albania. The talk will be focused on respective capital cities, urban transformations, policies that influence city design and planning, and efforts towards achieving a sustainable habitat and design strategies going forward. His Excellency Mr. Rahul Srivastava, the Ambassador of India to Romania, Albania, and Moldova, is the chief guest today. And the session will be moderated by me, Vertica Dvivedi. I'm the editor-in-chief of Surfaces Reporter. And with me, I have a very lovely co-moderator, Aurela Cuku, who is the founder of Artissima Art Gallery and Artissima Art Agency. So without wasting more time, I would like to invite the chief guest of the session, His Excellency Mr. Rahul Srivastava. He is the Ambassador of India to Romania, Albania, and Moldova. He was born in Chhattisgarh state in central India, and he spent his earlier years growing up in Odisha. But now he lives in Delhi, India, with his wife and two beautiful children. He has attended Ravenshaw University in Cuttack and the National Institute of Technology, Rourkela, both of which are in Odisha. His work and his passion is very visible. And as a diplomat, his work has taken him to many interesting places. And you'll find it very interesting to know that at the age of 40, he became India's 10th youngest appointed ambassador. He has also penned several books, which include several works of fiction and even one narrative self-help non-fiction title. So we are very much eager to listen to you. Mr. Rahul Srivastava, over to you now. The screen is all yours.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Kukreja, Ms. Ristani. It's a wonderful experience having this triangular kind of webinar where we have India, Albania, and Romania. And maybe I'm the connection because I'm also ambassador to Albania. So thanks for the initiative. I think it's a good one because I'm ambassador to Romania, Albania, and Moldova, and I'm resident in Bucharest. What mostly happens is most of my time goes into doing work for Romania, but I make it a point that I visit Albania very often. Since this year, I have visited thrice already. So I hope to pay one or two more visits because the new government comes into place in September in Albania. The Prime Minister has won for the third time. So that also brings me to the connection that we have, meaning we have the Deputy Mayor, Ms. Ristani here. The present Prime Minister of Albania, he was earlier Mayor of Tirana also. So one of the things that I noticed when I visited Tirana the first time, and that's one thing maybe many people notice, apart from the fact that it's a beautiful city, it's a very colorful city. So my question was, why is it that the buildings have this, you see one building which is of one color, the other building which is painted like a painting. So I was told that the present Prime Minister, when he was correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ristani, when he was the mayor of Tirana, and he's a painter. So he wanted to bring this colorful landscape in Tirana, and that is how the buildings look very different from each other, and it's very bright. So that is one of the things that catches your attention. But there's one, although Tirana's population officially it's about 1 million, officially maybe 350,000, and unofficially maybe up to 1 million, but still it's quite a small city. But the other thing that I noticed, and this was because I was in Delhi last year. I'm not, just to correct Ms. Vertica, I'm not posted in Delhi now. I'm in Bucharest. So my CV is a bit old. When I was in Delhi. Yes, I spent a lot of time in Delhi. So when I came to Tirana, the other thing that struck me, and therein lies a similarity with Delhi, it's a very green city. And it's a personal preference. I like places which are very green, and that way I'm fortunate that all the three cities that I'm accredited to, mostly that I visit Tirana or Chisinau or I'm in Bucharest, they're very green. Same about Delhi. Delhi is also a very green city. And sometimes people are surprised when you go to Delhi, you will see monkeys, you will see birds, and it's a capital city with 30 million people. It's a huge city. Same about Tirana without the monkeys and birds, but it's also a very green city. So I like that. And I was, Delhi is a very old city. It's got thousands of years of history. Uh, Tirana is about, when was it founded? Maybe 1500 something, so about 600 years old. So, like Delhi, I see that Tirana also has a bit of character in a sense. It combines the rich history with the very modern present, modern time. So, I see buildings which are historical. At the same time, you will see buildings which are very new. Same about Delhi. And I was doing some reading about Delhi some time ago, and I was surprised that Delhi has the second largest number of birds of any capital city. So this I can also say is very true because I remember living in South Delhi and I was astonished at the number of birds we had. In the evening, you would have the birds filling up the trees. So you would hear more of the birds chirping than you will see then you will hear the traffic. So that's also one thing that I like about Delhi. And another fact I found was about the various gates that Delhi has. Delhi has been having all kinds of rulers for about several thousand years that it has existed. Delhi at some point in time had 30 gates. And of the 30 gates, we have only just about 5 still remaining. We have architects here, so they will tell us maybe more features about the gates. We have even forts in Delhi. And what is great about the Red Fort is that it was not a red fort. At some point of time, it was a fort which was made of limestone. Maybe the British made it red. So we have these various unique things, meaning of the past and then the present. If you go to places in South Delhi, when you see the malls, you feel that it's a very modern city. So I will leave it to Mr. Kukreja to enlighten us about the great things that Delhi has to show, both in terms of the historical context and the modern context. I will end by saying a few things about India and Albania. Our diplomatic relations, they started in the year 1956, and we have very good relations with Albania. I would want more visits to happen, more people to people contact to happen, like the present one. It's a good initiative because this is the first of its kind that I'm seeing. I hope this encourages more interaction between India and Albania. We have visits which are not very often, but at the same time, we have very good relations because of the various reasons. We have the legacy of Mother Teresa, because Mother Teresa is when I land at the airport in Tirana, where you have a huge statue of Mother Teresa. And recently I traveled to the north of Albania. Again, I found a huge statue of Mother Teresa. So Mother Teresa is revered in India. And so that's a very strong connection that we have. The missing links like trade, for example, is increasing. And in the last 1 year, although trade between India and other countries, many countries, it decreased. Overall world trade decreased. But with Albania, our trade increased. So that's a good thing that is happening. I hope to do a little more things on culture because this year we celebrate the 75th anniversary of India's independence. So when I visit maybe in September, I'll meet Ms. Ristani and we can see what we can do more on people-to-people contacts on culture. So congratulations once again for having this meet together. And I look forward to listening more about Delhi. Although having lived there for almost 25 years, I'm sure that I'll get to hear things about Delhi, which I never knew. Same about Tirana. I look forward to increasing my knowledge on Tirana also. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So all of us are waiting to know more about the connection between Delhi and Tirana from Architect Dikshu Kukreja and Ms. Ristani. So Architect Kukreja, do you have any question, anything for Mr. Srivastava? I have one.
Go ahead then. First you go. Please.
Sure. Okay, I was reading about him. I was going through all these things. Oh my goodness, he's so dynamic, so much of things. Like it's one session will be required to, know more about the ideas that he has. But I would like to have one question answered. That is about your books, especially the self-help book. Can you tell us more about that?
I think we can skip this question because I want that we talk about Delhi and Tirana first, and later on, if we have time, I'm sure we'll.
Okay. We'll definitely catch you up again in the time to come. So now I would like to welcome a lovely lady. Her name is Aurela, and she is the co-moderator of this session. So let me tell you a few words about Aurela. She's a travel and art enthusiast, independent curator, and managing partner of Artissima Art Gallery, which is located in Dubai. And she is a person who has goal to make the gallery alive, vibrant, and colorful by reflecting the expression, dreams, history, and culture of people worldwide. So I would like to request Aurela to kindly introduce Ms. Ristani and to go forward with the presentation.
Hello to everyone. I'm so happy to be here today, and it is a pleasure for me to be part of this introduction. I wanted only just to add a little bit that I represent also the Tirana Chamber of Commerce in the United Arab Emirates. Today I am representing whatever it is possible that we can do, even if we cannot meet right now, but at least through this Zoom meeting we can reach people to understand a little bit more what is happening to Tirana and what is happening as well to New Delhi. I would like to introduce Ms. Anuela, that is the Deputy Mayor of Tirana, in charge of international affairs and sustainable development. She joined the city in 2015 as the chief staff and was appointed deputy after 2019 elections. During her work, she has overseen the Green City Action, the Tirana Child-Friendly Agenda, and the Resilience and Sustainability Strategies. Prior to join local government, she established the National Youth Service, where she also co-founded Regional Youth Cooperation Office with the participation of the 6 Western Balkan countries. Ristani joined public service from more than a decade of experience and multinational corporations and international organizations, where she serves as strategic management and communication expert. Welcome, Anuela.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and good afternoon to everybody who's overseas, and good morning to other people who are closer by. This is impressive to make the connection between Tirana and New Delhi, and it's just one of those things that are not straightforward, and but that should happen so much more, because there's so many connections, just like the ambassador said, and there's so much unity in certain things that are historical, and everybody talks about it, but we do not do enough to cater to them. And so for me, it's an exquisite pleasure not just to be in this in such great company with everybody here, but also because I think it's one of this first steps into creating this bridge of communication between not just two nations, but also two cities that have so much more to share. To be really honest with you, there have been serious attempts to make this connection in the child-friendly agenda, because we work with international partners that always pick up cities in India and Tirana to really make the connection of how we create spaces for kids, which is one of the most designated species in order to create urban cohabitation in the most improved ways. So very, very nice to be here. And I will just try and do my best to give you a little bit of a snapshot of where we are now and how we came to be here in Tirana. And I'll be delighted to then get your feedback and receive your questions. So if the moderators would allow me, I'll move on with my presentation. Is that okay?
Please.
Do I get a thumbs up? Okay. Super. So just a bit of patience till I share my screen with you, and we can move on. Okay. I think this is good. Does everybody have a screen? I don't
Yes,
see.
we can see that.
Yeah, mine just turned black for some reason, so I apologize. Does everybody see this? It's just
Yes, we do.
for some reason it's getting stuck. Can you bear with me and I do close and open it again? I don't know what happened. We tried this before and it worked just fine, but I'll try and do this again. Is that okay with you guys? It's just like for some reason my laptop is frozen and it just allows our connection. Maybe we can move on to the next presentation until I fix this and do not require more time.
Okay. You can
Would that be
just stop the sharing once and try once more.
Yeah, it's just not doing anything. That's why I cannot
Please
try
take your
it.
time.
But yeah, sorry. I truly apologize.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Do you want to move on with the other until I get this fixed, or do you want to wait for me to try once again?
We would wait for a few moments and then maybe move forward.
Okay. I know what happened. Sorry.
In the meantime, I have a question for Miss Aurela Cuku. You said you are you represent the Tirana chamber. So is it different from UCCIA? That's the Albanian chamber.
Yes, the Tirana chamber. Yes, the CCIA.
Okay. No, because there's a chamber called UCCIAL. Are you representative of that chamber?
The Tirana chamber. It is only one, I think.
So that's the chamber. Because we put them in touch with some 5 or 6 chambers recently in India, and they are doing something. No, my question was if there's a separate Tirana chamber and separate Albania chamber, or is it just one?
Yeah,
Because
they are separate. Tirana chamber is separate.
okay.
Excellency, can I just add, Excellency?
Please.
Vertica, if Ms. Anuela has some technical problem, can we flip the session?
Yes.
We can have Mr. Dikshu first, and then in the meantime, Anuela can
with all permission from all of you, now I'll be moving ahead, and I will, let's allow Ms. Ristani to take her time and do it. At the meantime, I will introduce Architect Dikshu Kukreja, and I would request him to go ahead with his presentation. So, Architect Dikshu Kukreja, we all know, like, he doesn't need any introduction. He's the managing principal of CP Kukreja Architects. CPK is ranked among the top 100 architecture firms in the world and top 5 in Asia. CPK has achieved the unique distinction of being the first design firm in India to have acquired a US-based design practice specializing in sustainability. Mr. Kukreja has been selected as the Young Icon of the Decade, Best Citizen of India, and most recently as the Face of 21st Century Architecture in India, and recently also featured in Who's Who of Asia. He has been a guest writer in so many publications, and he has been also, featured by CNBC TV on the program Young Turks. So without wasting more time, I would like to request Architect Kukreja to please kindly share his presentation.
Sure. Thank you so much, Vertica, for a very lovely introduction. And I'm delighted to be here in the company of His Excellency, the Ambassador Srivastava, also who I have known for a while in terms of his dynamism. And of course, Anuela is somebody who's extremely passionate about what she does for Tirana. So looking forward to that presentation as well. I'm happy to start talking or narrating the tale of Delhi. So let me start with the presentation here. I hope this technically works. Can you see it on your screen?
Absolutely fine.
Lovely. So this is truly a wonderful opportunity where we are getting to, all of us are sitting in different parts of the world, and I'm already informed that there are 21 different nations from where people have hooked in. So I don't know whether to greet good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, but it's wonderful that people from across the world are keen to know about these two wonderful cities, New Delhi and Tirana. I believe that when I talk about Delhi and when I talk to people about Delhi, it reminds me of that story about the 4 blind men and an elephant, because it's about what lenses you see Delhi from, which aspects you see or experience Delhi from, that it comes across as a very different place for different people. It has that kind of a quality that it's a city which has so many shades to it that it has different perspectives in the eyes of different people. And as India celebrates its 75 years, we believe, let me just change the slide here one moment. Okay, am I running into a technical error because I'm trying to change the slide here? Just give me a moment, please. We do have our technical challenges going on. Let's see if this works. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll interrupt you once. Just use the arrows that you have used just now and it will be absolutely fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. So India, as Ambassador Srivastava mentioned, we are at a very important moment in our history where we are celebrating 75 years of our independence. And that is literally a historical milestone. But I thought today that I'll narrate the tale of Delhi starting from India's independence. Of course, Delhi was a capital city before that as well, but it has been the capital of India since independence. And these images that you see can be quite touching, quite in a way horrific, when you see that how Delhi, which was having a modest population of less than 1 million people at the time of partition, and there was, in history of the world, there was this largest exodus which took place during partition, when people were traveling like this from Pakistan to Delhi. And that really transformed the character of the city, its urban conditions. And of course, today, as we all are watching on TV and news what goes on in Kabul, these images you can see are manifold when it comes to the kind of transition that took place of people and lives, in for that matter, from one nation to another. And here you see, as people moved and sort of just settled in whatever form and way they could, in whatever kind of habitat they could create for themselves back in those times, next to glorious monuments like some of those which Ambassador Srivastava was mentioning about, Delhi began to transform. These are some more of those images. But from that point, which was in 1947, for this big nation, large nation, and this larger city to change its complexion altogether overnight was a mammoth moment. And for that, really, there was also the aspect that, it had to take time to stand on its feet. So let me fast forward a couple of decades and move straight to the early 70s. So this is an image of 1970, where when, in Delhi, it was decided to build one of the nation's largest universities, because the government realized that for the country to prosper, we needed to have strong fundamentals and strong foundation in education. And that's where the genesis of the Jawaharlal Nehru University, named after India's first Prime Minister, came up. And this lady on the left was the Prime Minister at that time in 1970. And this gentleman on the right, this young man second from the right on the screen, is architect C.P. Kukreja, who won this competition for the Nehru University. Now, there were many universities coming across India at that time. What makes JNU so special? JNU even today is very, very special. But if I talk about the design of JNU, it made many firsts. It was a complete departure. You see this archival drawing from that time and you realize there were no such grand axes as you see on Rajpath or the kind of planning you see in Chandigarh. This was completely a new departure. Departure in many ways. And one of them was about how, you embrace nature, how you embrace the context, how you embrace the environment around, and you create an architecture which is sustainable. So these images of buildings actually designed and built almost 50 years ago is how the architecture was. You see the deep overhangs which reduce the heat glare into the building. You see the natural use of brick material and many, many such elements of sustainable architecture. Another new or first in this country with JNU came the concept of, till now universities were designed that faculty housing would be on one end of the campus and student housing on another. JNU was the first such campus where you fused the two together and you created clusters and you notice on your screen each cluster had student housing and faculty housing, and that's how the clusters went all about the campus. So in those ways, JNU really was a departure and bringing a new identity to a modern resurgent India. Here are the kind of transitory spaces between one building to another. Again, the play of light and shadow, which is so significant in our tropical architecture. An interesting image of what, believe it or not today, it was designed as a computer center. Now, why this kind of an architecture? The computers that were housed in this building at that time were actually costing more than the cost of the building itself. That was what computers at that time were, in terms of technology. And in India, where in electricity, power supply was very uncertain in those times, how do you reduce the heat going into the building? So this was the architectural response to the computer center of the times. Moving another decade forward, where India started really showing a certain direction that we are a pluralistic nation. We embrace all religions. We are secular for that matter. And how do you bring that into the culture and throes of New Delhi? So here came an opportunity again for our firm to design what is called Karmapa International Buddhist Institute. And this was actually a brainchild of Dalai Lama. The Honorable Dalai Lama wanted to create this kind of a facility, a monastery, so to speak, in the heart of Delhi, because at that time foreigners were not allowed to travel to Sikkim. So this was the solution, and the Prime Minister gave this kind of land right here in the heart of Delhi. Now, how do you create a monastery or the feeling of a monastery in the heart of Delhi? How do you bring in the art and culture? How do you bring in that sense of color and craftsmanship? So there were actually craftsmen who were brought in from Sikkim, and there were 500 of them who went about designing this building. Now, if you would think that this is all done in timber, no, Delhi's climate would not have allowed that. So all that you see here is done in brick and concrete, but it's all done with such kind of craftsmanship that it really reminisces the experiences of the Rumtek monastery. And in that aspect, I would say this building really brings in a celebration of culture. It's not just about religion anymore, it's about a way of life. And that's what this architecture brought to the face of Delhi. After that, if we come into the early 90s, where the country became more economically, there was a liberalization that took place. There was a lot of global influences that came, and Delhi was growing. In fact, Delhi was really expanding as it had not in the last 40 years. It was galloping at a fast pace. Well, that brought about a lot of challenges. So now if you're wondering, this image before you happens to be three angels who are floating amongst the clouds, or you think there are three mountaineers who have reached the peaks of Himalayas. Unfortunately not. This happens to be the image of the toxic waste that has been created on the Yamuna River. Now, I know in a few moments, Anuela will share with us how the river has become the heartthrob in the city of Tirana. Now, I'm not painting this picture to show any kind of, grim identity of Delhi, but I just want to tell you that, Delhi has faced its challenges just like any other city would, except in our case, Delhi is a huge city. And from that aspect, we have to understand that its challenges, its complexities are far larger than any other city, I would say, in the world. Here, our firm has been involved in, the master plan of Delhi, the new master plan of Delhi, which is for the year 2041. So for the next 20 years, is just coming into life. It's in the public domain, inviting suggestions from the citizens of Delhi. And in this particular image that you see, we have been fortunate also to participate actively in providing suggestions to how Delhi can improve, or for that matter, how Yamuna, the river Yamuna, can go through a transformation, just the way it is being a very thriving part in any city, whether it's Paris, London, or anywhere else. The rivers play a very significant role. Let's take an example of closer home, the Marina Bay in Singapore. This is what it looked like half a century back. And then it went about a transformation. And these are images which now are globally iconic images of Singapore. So how you can go about transforming a water feature of a city and create something which becomes not only an iconic feature, but also the green lungs, as you see here, for a city, is something which, the river Yamuna also has potential for. As I mentioned, challenges of Delhi, well, the river Yamuna being one, we do have other challenges as well. Because of its huge population, it is one of the most populated cities in the world. And therefore, unfortunately, it's become one of the most polluted cities of the world as well. It is clogged with traffic of every possible kind that you see. And with this clogging, unfortunately, it really relegates the pedestrian. The pedestrian ceases to exist. And ceases to exist, I would not say just from the point of view of, being amongst, squeezed in this clog of traffic, but also sometimes, the accidental deaths that take place on our roads. So this has been an image for the last few decades. And one of the transformations that Delhi has been going through, and we've been very fortunate as architects to be the first Indian architecture firm to be involved with the underground metro that came about in Delhi. And soon Delhi has really, the metro has expanded all across the city. Not only has it improved the connectivity of the city, but also, very importantly, it is changing the urban vocabulary of the city of Delhi. Now, this is the kind of image you see across Delhi, the metro running from one corner to another. So in this kind of a scenario, what can we do? We have been fortunate as architects to have the opportunity to advise the government, and not just advise, but bring into reality these images that you're seeing in front of you. This is a new direction we are giving to the city of Delhi. So we are designing India's first and Delhi's first transit-oriented development across Delhi. This is one such example. It is on about 85 acres of land, which is about 30 plus hectares. And this is how we are transforming. So all around that you see is the Delhi which is existing. And this is how we have created a very organic density. We are not talking about central vistas here. We are talking about a Delhi which embraces the environment around it and organically grows. Of course, with the high densities, the high pressures on the land. This is a building that is going to be the tallest building of Delhi. It's already under construction. So we are talking about how to create Delhi as a vertical city. This image that you see in front of you goes back to Delhi's culture. I'm going to paraphrase it in Hindi, where, Delhi has existed for centuries with the concept of Niche Dukan, Upar Makan, which is basically a mixed-use development, keeping the thriving city alive all through 24 hours of the day, where you have a retail mix on the ground levels and you have housing above. This is the new direction in which Delhi hopes to grow, and not just Delhi. Through this project, I hope I can set an example for the rest of the cities in India that as they struggle with the paucity of land, they don't just expand horizontally, Los Angeles being one such example for which I'm not a fan of, but we start going more vertical and at the same time keep the city thriving, keep the city alive, and give the city, as you see on this screen, a new intelligent skyline. So this is what we hope our Delhi and other cities are going to look like for that matter. And these are some of those images of the new kind of development. Now, I could go on and talk about many, many more tales of Delhi, but I think I should stop here because I'm sure many of you are very anxiously waiting to hear what Tirana looks like. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Architect Kukreja. And yes, Anuela has just informed me that she's ready and she's ready to share right now. So over to you, Ms. Ristani.
I do apologize. This has never happened before, so hopefully, you know, something that starts as a challenge. Hopefully, it's a good omen. So, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this real quick, and should be okay. Everybody good?
Yes.
Nothing broke. Great.
Nothing.
Great. So, yes, Tirana is pretty young. We just celebrated the 100-year anniversary of Tirana capital. We were supposed to celebrate it last year, 2020, but because of the pandemic, then, you know, everything was put on hold. But the next occasion is next year, we're going to be the European Youth Capital 2022. And so it's the first time a capital city in Europe is the capital of youth. And I think it's very suitable for us being such a young city. And because the ambassador was saying we should do something for the 70th year anniversary of India, then this is really the right year to do lots of stuff, especially with young people, especially with culture and all of, you know, these topics that really unite us so much. So I really want to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what we have been up to in these last 7 years in the city of Tirana. But before that, just, you know, to give a little bit of a context to the audience that might be a little bit wider than just, you know, those who know where we are. We're really located at the south center of Europe, which is the first misperception about Albania, always being referred to as Eastern European. And I always have this discussion in every panel I go, because technically it is such a geopolitical term that resonates with a time past that has been very hurtful for us. And so I always want to show where we are exactly, to really kind of like fight a little bit that pre-perception of us being the Eastern bloc of Europe. We're actually the South Central part of Europe. And so we've been stuck for a long time in between these three domains, which is 500 years of Ottoman Empire and then 50 years of you know, communist and really North Korea of Europe, we've been considered. And then in this attempt for almost 30 years now to join the European Union, Brexit, ambiguous European Union, and we still, I mean, we are a candidate country, but we still haven't been invited to open the chapters. So that gives a little bit of a context of where we are. And yes, we're very small, but we were a lot smaller. So this is the first urban map of the city 100 years ago. And as you can see, all of those little yellowish dots are basically buildings. You know, for those of you who are architects, this is a plan of the city. And it was basically a village, just a neighborhood back then in 1920. But not just that, even during communism, it was only 200,000 inhabitants. So I'll just give you some satellite images of 89. This was what Tirana looked like. This is 99, so 10 years later. This is 2009, and this is 2019. So just to give you a little bit of a context of how much it grew, how fast, And we ended up quadrupling the population in 25 years. And now the new census is upcoming. And yes, it does count more than 1 million people living in Tirana. And that is just residents. But we grow every year by a small city. So every year Tirana registers 25 up to 30,000 new inhabitants, which I know by daily numbers this is insignificant, but for a city of this size it's a huge increase. So it's basically, you know, entire villages and entire cities coming to Tirana proportionately every year. And so this is a little bit of a mess where we found the city. This is a picture from 2015. So obviously lots of work to do on finished buildings, a little bit of sprawl, unplanned buildings, not enough infrastructure to serve, you know, this high density population. A lot of challenges in there. So where do you actually start when you have such a long list of needs? We actually started right from the center. And the center, because not only because it's, you know, the place where everybody goes to, but also because it's very symbolic in terms of the identity of Albanians, not just of Tirana as a city, but of Albanians in their history, in their entirety. And the reason why we started from the center is this is how it used to look like when I was a little girl. And this was in the 80s. Back then we had no cars. As you can see, you can probably notice 1 or 2 buses in the square, and everybody was walking. The private cars were a little bit of a luxury. We were not allowed to have private property, so we weren't allowed to have private vehicles. So everybody used to walk, and this was the center. It was a place where people would just walk around. There's a terminal zero, so you basically would just walk around, and that's how you meet people back in the 80s. But then after the Berlin Wall fell and communism fell, people all of a sudden started to own cars. And as you can see, this public space of, you know, walking around and about with people became smaller and smaller, and you can see it shrinking right there in the middle. And so cars appeared. So they invaded the city with their presence up to when it got to this. And so this was the center of Tirana. This was the center of Albania. This was our central square, which is not really a square by any means. It was basically just a roundabout for cars, so that people, when they would come to Tirana or from anywhere in the city, they would just first get in this roundabout and then decide where they wanted to go. Obviously not suitable for a city that aspires to be vibrant and modern and urban. And so that's exactly where we started. We counted that in a single day, there would be roughly 150,000 cars going around about this place. And there was not a destination, there was just a transit point to get to somewhere else that was a little bit more pleasant than this. So we just got into the gear, and this got done in 10 months' time. The whole city, the whole square was closed to cars. It's now completely 100% pedestrian. And this is a picture from the first day when we decided to open. And this was before we would open the gates. Because when we opened the gates, it looked like this. And to me, every time I see the picture, is a little bit of touching, because not only does it show how much people need public space and people need space and space that is safe, but it's also some sort of a right. You know, they're taking a right back, a right to go about in a safe and their own way and their own space in the center of their own city, and have that space be theirs. So to me, this is basically a testimony of whatever effort that you do in removing cars and creating public spaces for pedestrian is a little bit of more human right. You know, it's actually a human right. It's a right that has been taken away by all of this development that was erratic, that was uncontrollable, that was not, you know, in a line of thought that is sustainable and green and legal. And you take it away from people, but if you give it back to them, they do wonderful things with it. This was on our first day. We had a huge celebration. This was before COVID, so bear with me with the pictures. And all of the space around the square is green to mitigate for the temperatures that we have here. They can go pretty high during the summer in Tirana, even though we're a Mediterranean country. It can go up to 50. It can go up to 40 degrees Celsius, and so we needed some green spaces to mitigate the high temperature that was in the square, and also some water features around it. So basically the square of the city is a huge garden around it, and then a huge space in the middle for people to celebrate, for kids to take their bikes. These water features also help with the heat during the summer and during the high density times. And also it's just a democratic area where you basically can just spend a very healthy time. You don't need to sit in cafes and restaurants. There's this public space that you can just enjoy. This was any normal afternoon before COVID. And there's nothing happening, because if there's something happening in the square, this is how it looks like. And so that's why the center of it is basically this huge area of celebration. And around the center, there is a garden for people to enjoy any time of the day and night. So one of the other transformations that we had, the bazaar, or like the market in Mediterranean culture, and I'm sure also in Indian culture, is a little bit of an institution. Right? So it's not just a place where you buy and sell. It's not just a place of work. It's also a place of communication. It's also a place of community building. And so we were very heartbroken to see the bazaar, which was a 100 years old place, like this when we came in the office. It was one of these areas where you'd really skip. I was on my way to home. I would never go through here. I would just choose another route because it was so dirty and so unkempt that it was not a destination. It was not a place to go to. And so we decided, because the bazaar is an institution, this is the next project we have to deal with. And a lot of space, because people keep asking me about what about expropriation and all these spaces that were occupied. This was public space. So this is the same exact space. There was no expropriation in this area. And just because of a few interventions, it was cleaned up like this. And this market, which would sell fruits and vegetables, turned out to be this market. And if we were counting up to roughly 100 people working in the market with small businesses before the intervention, the last count that I had from our tax offices was 1,500 people being employed in the same exact area. No extension, no other investments other than cleaning up and doing the infrastructure, no other financial incentives. The same space, but a lot more pleasant, a lot more visitable, and a lot more joyful. Just a few pictures of what we do in the bazaar. During this day, it serves as a market. During the night, this glass area that you see, the glass ceiling, that whole area, we've been having shows and events and fashion exhibitions and all sorts of stuff, because you move the things very easily and then you occupy during the evening. So it's like a 24-hour usage space. Then the next project I wanted to show you guys is the boulevard. So every city has a boulevard, and when Tirana was founded 100 years ago by the Italians, by the fascists, by Mussolini, there was the supervisor of the works who said, because the fascist Italy wanted this huge boulevard, so when the Duce would come, they would have their parades and the military would show. And so the supervisor of the works, who came in Tirana, which was just a village back then, said, I have seen cities without boulevards, but I've never seen a boulevard without a city, because this is basically what this infrastructure was being built without it being populated around it. And for 100 years, the entire city grew on this backbone, which was a backbone planned for 5,000 inhabitants back then. They grew to be a lot more, but by the time we were 1 million, there was a very small backbone. And so all the sprawl was not anymore ordered, and people would, occupy any land they could, and infrastructure came after. And so, you had 2-3 buildings here and there, and you had to pave a road for those people to get into their homes. In this time, we decided, well, it's about time Tirana needs an extension of its main artery, of its main backbone, so that for the first time in so many years, we first have infrastructure in place, and then we have development. And so this was the whole point of this project, and this is what came out of it. And obviously, since we're doing it now and we know so many things about urban development and we know so many things about what is a more democratic urban development, this whole project was done in a very democratic way in terms of how we share space. And I was mentioning to you before, how much space cars occupy. The boulevard was built 70% for pedestrians, so bikers and pedestrians, and then 30% of the space is the space for the cars. Why is that? Well, because in Tirana, 70% of people do not own a vehicle. And so, retirees or people of a certain age or kids, they do not own vehicles. And so, but they are the majority of the population. And so the space should be proportionally allocated to the people accordingly to their means of transportation, accordingly to their needs. And so the boulevard is such a pedestrian area that during COVID was one of the main destinations for people to, take some fresh air and walk. And during the evening, because there's so many people, they also go and occupy car space, which I completely love. It's just because, there's a lot more people than cars. And so they, the road is closed in certain times, and it's basically full of people conquering also the space for cars. And the next project that I care very much about, and it was mentioned a little bit during my introduction, is our project for the kids. In a city of 1 million, when we came into this office, we found out there were 0 public playgrounds in Tirana, and that cannot be. In a city that has at least 300,000 citizens that are below adulthood, so they're kids, teenagers, and then younger children, this was not the case. It had to be changed. So we started from one of the biggest areas in Tirana, which is our lake park. And we built an all-inclusive, these are the architects, Olsen Wilson, I'm sure you've heard of them. And we started from this, which was a big fight because, people were not used to the city building playgrounds. And because this was in a green area so that it would mitigate for high temperatures in the summer, they were very apprehensive. They were skeptical of us interfering in green areas, but it turned out that this was in the morning, early in the morning when it opened, so it's super famous, and there's the same amount of people visited every single day. And so since that became so successful, we decided to just move on. In every neighborhood we could find a space. Our deal with the citizens is, if you find an area, if you find an idle area close to your neighborhood, we are going to make a playground out of it. And so the entire city went into this frenzy of search. Oh, there's this parking lot and it would be better used if we were building a playground. Oh, it's fine if these guys move their gate a little further and if this coffee shrinks a little bit their seats and chairs so that we get great space for kids. And this became like a national exercise, like city exercise for everybody to find really spaces for kids. And we managed, our commitment was in the first 4 years to build 1 playground for each month in the office. We just opened our 77th playground yesterday, and we've been 73 months in the office. So kind of like surpassed that target and makes us very happy. But just to show you that, and I get asked this question of how do you do this? And just to show you that this is existing space. And like with the bazaar, this was completely existing public space that was just not being taken care of. It's the same space, no expropriation, and it's transformed into this. And the most beautiful thing about it is that when you create spaces for kids, everybody's happy. So you have parents who feel okay with their kids playing downstairs. You have grandparents interacting with other grandparents and becomes a socializing space and becomes a community building space. Because if you have a lot of people all the time downstairs, then the neighborhood becomes safe. You know, people get to know each other. They get to know if somebody who's suspicious comes in and out, and that's how the city becomes safe. And Tirana is one of the safest cities in Europe of this size. So just to show you spaces before and after, there are 77 of this, like I said. So I'm not going to show you all of them, but I'm going to go to the next project that, well, it's not a project, but it's an effort that is ongoing, which is our bike lanes. Again, there were 0 bike lanes. So biking in Tirana was a little bit of a extreme sport because there was no space for you to bike. And obviously people were not very encouraged to use their bikes in the city. And so what we did was 2 things. Well, first of all, you do build infrastructure and you need that infrastructure. And second of all, you need a little bit of an education and accessibility about it too. So what we started was this program with kids that are, they go in kindergarten, and we have this bike, if you see, they're the same bikes for boys and girls. And we teach them since they're 3 or 4-year-olds to ride their bikes. And once they're safe, in their backyard, in the backyard of the kindergarten, then we take them into the protected bike lanes. And what does it do? Not only gives kids the confidence of independence and ability to really ride in the city, not just, you know, within their homes, but it makes the drivers who are driving past become so much more aware of what's going on. And you know, if they see a small kid riding past in a bike lane, they're going to drive so much more carefully. They're going to be so much more aware of that situation. And you never know, they might just pick up their own bike and do the same thing that these guys are doing, because bike usage in Tirana has increased by double digits percentages every year. If you go around today and see, you know, the biking parkings, these are the most high demand parkings in the city, which we're trying to build a little bit more. Then become playful with pedestrians and with the areas where they walk, have a little bit more respect for, you know, people who walk, and a little bit more interaction from the city and from the city investments, so that walking can become pleasant as well. And these are just small interventions, enlarging the sidewalks. This is one of the sidewalks that we have doubled, making very visible signaling for cars on areas that they cannot under any circumstance cross, because they're for pedestrians and bikers, and doing the whole thing very rollable and very, very walkable overall. And during COVID, our bike sales increased so much that at some point there were no bikes for sale, and all of the usage of the public spaces was one of the best things that, you know, people could have wished for. And we were lucky to have it happen after some of these interventions had happened. Then the last thing I want to show you is our effort to plant trees. After our urban plan, which was designed by Boeri architects, you might know Boeri from the vertical forest, the idea was to create a horizontal forest, an orbital forest for Tirana. Not just because we needed a physical barrier between the sprawl and the urban development, so the high intensity development within the urban core, but also because trees are one of the best walls you can actually build. You know, they don't keep people out, they just keep people in, and they welcome a lot more. So in more technical detail, the orbital forest goes through through the areas where there are a lot of buildings, and through the detailed plans, we basically patch out the areas where we can plant trees, and we can make those patches green, matching with each other. Under our urban plan rules, if you own a patch of land and you want to develop, you cannot develop more than 45% of that area, and the 55% of the remaining lot becomes property of the city. It becomes public property, and those are the areas that we are using to plant trees when the high density of the urban development is there. When there is no high density or urban development, then we're planting massively trees, as you can see from some of these pictures, where everybody's planting trees, whether it's a birthday or an anniversary, or somebody was born, or there is Teacher Appreciation Day. This is so common and well spread that, you know, the girl in the first picture is my daughter, and that's her own tree. And I'm sure every kid in Albania who is that age has at least planted one tree here in Tirana. We're very proud of it. And it's a crowdsourcing type of financing, because obviously trees cost a lot of money and budgets in the city are always very limited. So by having people participate and contribute in this, you kind of make it a little bit more massive. And it's one of the best projects. What we're looking forward to. In November 2019, we had a very devastating earthquake hitting Tirana and cities nearby. And although we didn't have, in Tirana, we only had one casualty that was very unfortunate, was an accident in the time of the earthquake. Something fell on someone. But there were massive damage in terms of buildings that had been old or that had been built during communist time with, you know, volunteer work without proper technical equipment, or buildings built very informally during the years of transition. So up to 5,000 apartments, 5,000 families had to be moved out of these buildings that were unsafe. And it provided us for a huge opportunity to do this in a very systematic way. So what we're doing, again, this is one of the Boyari projects. We are building the new neighborhoods where not only people who lost their homes during the earthquake are going to be housed, but we have an opportunity to build resilient neighborhoods that are not just designed with public space in mind and with greenery, but they are mixed use. So in these new neighborhoods where we're going to host, or we're going to house people who lost their homes, they're not just going to be social housing areas. These are areas where you have business centers. These are areas where we're actually moving public institutions. So we're creating office space and we're creating residential space. Why is that important? Because it optimizes the use of space in between. During work hours, you know, people who work in these buildings and who work in these institutions, they benefit from the greenery of the residential space. And during the after hours, residents benefit from the spaces that are created, from the common spaces that are created that are not being used by the people who work in the institutions. And by creating this mixed usage, you do not stigmatize people who are in need of housing, of social housing or affordable housing. But this is any neighborhood like any other very, very nice neighborhood, new neighborhood where you would live to and you would choose also to buy a house. And that is why half of these apartments are being constructed for the people who lost their homes, and half of the others are going to be sold on market value just because of the facilities that it entails. So I just wanted to show you that last project, and I'll be extremely happy to be open for questions. And please, anything you want to know more about what we're doing and what has been done so far. Thank you so much for your attention. I enormously apologize for the technical glitch before, but hopefully I made it up with a little bit of speed during this presentation.
Yes, of
Thank
course.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Ristani. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Srivastava if he has any questions for Anuela.
No, I don't think I have any questions, but when I was seeing the presentation, I was reminded of the view that I have, because when you showed Skanderberg Square, on the background, you could also see that tall building coming up, and that tall building I anticipate is Maritime Plaza, where I stay every time I go there, and it's a huge, very tall hotel, so I get a very good view of the city. And as I said, I always admire a very green city, Tirana obviously is. And Skanderberg Square is the place where actually I go every evening. I spend time, and it's a very lively place. About JNU, when I was talking about South Delhi, I live very close to JNU. So JNU is a good example of how you can have modern architecture without destroying what is around you. It's a very green place. I love the place. I didn't know that it was by your firm.
Wonderful. So thank you, Ms. Ristani again. And do you have any questions for Architect Kukreja? You have, seen the presentation. before yours. Yes, Ms. Ristani, Anuela.
You were asking me if I have the question?
Yes, do you have any question for Architect Kukreja? You've seen the presentation, right? Then I will connect both the cities with my questions.
No, to be real with you, I just want to congratulate the work you guys are doing, because if we are saying that it's difficult to manage 1 million people, I can only imagine, what kind of a challenge architects have in a country that is so dense and has so many more development needs in terms of, the number of people it deals with. And so it kind of puts things into perspective, it's kind of like, yeah, we're dense and people complain about living very close to each other, but then there is a lot more density. And so one of the main debates here in Albania is why we are allowing more construction. And it's very easy to, do that, because they're saying, oh, but there's one other building and there's one other building. This not in my backyard type of approach, but in a city that grows by 30,000 people, housing is one of these things that cities that are a lot more developed than ours are being challenged with. And if you do not keep up the pace of the development with the pace of your incoming people, then that's very hard to manage. We are in one of the coldest days where we are picking up everybody who was living outside. We found 100 people living in the streets, and that was just by lifestyle choice. And so, but in other cities like Dublin, which is comparable to Tirana, the mayor was telling me we have 5,000 beds that we pay every time the weather is unbearable. So managing the need for housing and also the need for the city to develop, because you mentioned the plaza, Mr. Ambassador, but here in Tirana, all the hotels before the pandemic and now that people are returning, they're above 90% capacity. I'm talking about the 5-star hotels. And that's not going to happen, and we're not going to be more approachable in terms of tourism if we do not provide capacity, if we do not provide enough beds and enough hospitality. So one of the main challenges for us every time there's elections or political debates is like, oh, you're building so much in the city and it wasn't like this before, and we loved it when there were no buildings and there were no people. It's like, yeah, sure, but that's the whole point of living in an urban space. You share and you create community and you learn how to share with each other and give everybody the space they need. So I'm just amazed at how you guys are doing it and how you're sanely managing this thing when it's a lot more challenging than in here.
So I won't comment on the sane part of it, whether we are still sane or not, I don't know, but the scale is truly enormous. I have to accept that we are living in a city, or we are talking about a city where every few years 1 million people are getting added to it. So the kind of numbers that one is looking at is enormous. And I think they will, just the way you have a debate raging there, similarly, we have a debate here in India as well, that how much can you allow a city to grow? Where do you put a stop to it? And I don't think you can ever put a stop to it, but as designers, as urbanists, you have to come out with the right solution. And I think, for example, Delhi faces the challenge of scarcity of water or the quality of air. It doesn't mean that, it's going to go away if you reduce the number of people coming into the city. I think the solutions are about how do you build or densify, making it resilient, like you mentioned, and making it sustainable. If we build with environment-friendly technologies and environment-friendly systems, there is still a way to go to further densify. In fact, in today's newspaper in Delhi, there is an article about what we have also in Delhi it's called a metropolitan Delhi, just like you have in any big metropolis in the world, New York, Tokyo. And in Delhi now is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world. And there is so we have a national capital planning board. And that has deliberated and come up with a solution that Delhi should have 5 to 8, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 sub-cities that should be built around Delhi. so that people don't just keep coming into Delhi. So there are different solutions that keep coming on board, but I think the right solution, no matter which way we go, there are many ways to look at it. I think some of the projects that you shared, Anuela, what is important is in a democracy such as ours as well, to give a thriving public space. You need to make public spaces thriving, whether they are playgrounds or whether they are plazas or whether they are the riverfront. These are the places which are the urban forests. These are the places which become the heart and soul of a city. So no matter whether you densify a city or you don't, the fact is that you need to give a city these kind of lungs, these kind of public places to celebrate.
Yes, Mrs. Sani. So I would like to now go to Aurela and ask her, like, if she has any question, because I have a lot of them. So before I start with the round of questions, Aurela, do you have any question for any of the speakers?
I would like to make a question to Dikshu. So I know that you have studied in Oxford University, traveled all over the world, done different projects internationally. Which are the flavors that you have brought to your projects, especially to Delhi?
So just a correction there, Aurela. I went to Harvard, not Oxford, but yes, the experience was still, I'm sure, equally mesmerizing, if not more. My time that I spent in the US, which was many years, and then I had the opportunity to work in France, in Paris for a year. I think all these influences, including some of our design offices that we've set up in Tokyo and Vietnam and New York, I think what I realized today is, and today's presentation of Anuela also suggests the same, that no matter how large or big city it might be, no matter which part of the world people might be living in, but the aspirations are very similar. People are looking for spaces which are safe. People are looking for spaces which they can use in a friendly manner. So the bike lanes or the plazas that Anuela has talked about, or similar ideas that we are trying to propose in the city of Delhi, is about bringing people together. It's not just that you can build more and more roads or bring more and more cars into a city and that's going to be a solution. I think we did that 100 years ago and we've realized that wasn't the best solution. So my learnings going around the world have been that people aspire for public places. People aspire for, like the ambassador was mentioning, the two cities that we are talking about today, he reminisces about the green spaces in these cities. And that is something every citizen of a city really aspires to. We all love nature, like you see right behind me. Even in our office, we try to bring nature as close to us as possible. So I think it's these aspects which I have realized in my sort of experiences globally that I have tried to bring back into our country as much as possible.
Okay, so I have a round of questions. Architect Kukreja, you spoke about the Delhi Master Plan 2041, right? So we all know for a livable city how much the pedestrian-friendly roads are important. So what is being done in that context? What is being planned?
Delhi, yes, in the Delhi Master Plan, few new ideas have come up. One of them is, of course, similar to what Anuela again presented. It's about bikes, bringing bicycles on the road and bringing other non-motorized means of transport on the roads, more environment-friendly electric vehicles on the road. That is one policy. Second is that, to reduce vehicles, as in cars and other such modes of private transport, to dissuade it. You can't ban it, but to dissuade it. So to increase parking fees, create separate identified parking lots. You don't have to have the comfort that if you're coming to shop in a bazaar, that you must get your car right outside a particular shop. You can park away and you can walk. So those concepts are coming into the master plan. Another very important concept which I shared with you is the transit-oriented development, that people are able to walk to work, so you bring mixed land uses into the city. Earlier, for many decades, Delhi has been planned in a way that you had a master plan and you painted it like a Mondrian painting. It was red, yellow, blue. Red was meant to be the commercial part of the city, yellow was the residential, and blue was where you had institutions. Now it's changed. Like our project I showed you, we are bringing all the uses into one piece of land. So these are the new aspects which are coming into the master plan, including creating urban forests and revitalizing the river Yamuna. So I think we do have a bright future for our city as we look ahead.
Okay, because Ambassador Srivastava has to leave in next 10-15 minutes. So I would like to ask him if he has anything to, any opinion to share, any ideas to share, any question to ask to any of the speakers, please.
Maybe to the Deputy Mayor, I'll ask, supposing next year you say you have this, Tirana would be the European youth city. Congratulations for that. That's a great achievement. So what are the kind of projects or ideas that you are developing with other cities so that we can have something with India also?
So it's a great opportunity, not just to talk about youth, but what does youth resonate best today when it comes to them being publicly involved. And I think, and we hope that because it's the year of youth, we want to work together and include a little bit more and have Tirana become a little bit of a platform of the climate change movement, because that seems to be the one thing that unites all youth, no matter what country they're from. This is something they're demanding from their politicians. This is something they're demanding from their city managers. This is something that they're demanding from businesses, even from the way they're living and the way they're using. And this is one of these overarching topics for next year that we aspire to. But other than that, it's a huge opportunity for Tirana to display itself as a place that is still uncovered, that has still so much knowledge to absorb and to share. And it's an experience to so many young people. And they will put it in the map as a destination, not just to visit and not just to experience, but also maybe to start businesses and maybe to develop connections. And in a world that is so small, this is so much easier to do than what it was before. But definitely the climate change topic is the most youthful topic and the most youth-related topic that one could look for in this day and age.
Well, thanks for that. I have to rush now. It was a pleasure being here. Got lots of information both on Tirana and Delhi. So all the best, and thanks, Ms. Dvivedi, Mrs. Cuku. I hope I got the
yes, you're right.
Name correct. And also Mr. Rajendra Kumar, because he brought all this together. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you so much for your presence. It was wonderful having you here in this platform. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency. I mean, it was an honor to have you, sir, with us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
So, getting back, I think the question from Ambassador Srivastava was really good, and the way New Delhi and Tirana can get connected and exchange ideas to further develop. Before that, I have a few more questions, and these questions, let us be open and discuss. Whoever would like to respond, it's fine. Like, we know that with the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, how much it is important for a city to be prepared with the health infrastructure. While I was seeing the presentation by Anuela, I was, seeing the way you have showed us a picture, but you haven't shown anything, what happened when the pandemic had struck, and how the city responded to it. What about the health infrastructure? What are you people doing in that aspect?
Vertica, Anuela, before we comment, I just wanted to take a permission of Anuela and Dikshu together that we already crossed 20 minutes above our schedule. Do we have like a 5 minute more, Dikshu sir and Anuela, or how much time do you want to? Let's 5 minutes more. So
Sure, no problem.
So Vertica, 5 minutes more we should.
Sure. So, Anuela, you have to unmute. Yes, you have done it. So, I would like to know about the health infrastructure of the city.
So, I I did mention a little bit of during our conversation, and we were very lucky to close up very early. And the closure was once mandated by health officials, absolutely was not a local affair, was for the whole country. We had a very aggressive lockdown for the first month, and that was March 2020, which contained the pandemic in a way that enabled these health institutions, all hospitals, to get ready for the rise later on. And we started the vaccinations as soon as they became available immediately. But this is all health management. What the city offered to the situation and what the cities have to offer in any situation, it's basically something, and you guys mentioned it here, everybody aspires to the same thing. And there are certain things that are pandemic proof, they are crisis proof. And those things are public spaces, play spaces, community building spaces, and all of this livability criteria that works for any circumstance. Like I said before, people they couldn't go to restaurants and bars, which was very similar to what we couldn't do when we were the North Korea of Europe and we didn't have private property, which was basically using what is public, using what is of everyone and making the best out of it. So people took walks, they did sports in the park because they couldn't go to the gym. They used their bikes because we weren't allowed to have private vehicles because of the safety concerns. And they started to walk and started to bike again and started to live again. And there was no other attraction but each other, basically, and the common space. And so what happens if we do not have this common space? Well, obviously, there are mental health concerns. Obviously, the pandemic is a lot more difficult to manage. But these are not things or changes that we do because there is a pandemic. This is basically all the criteria that you have in mind for a livable and for a nice city to live in. And the pandemic only displayed what we as city managers already knew, that for a city to be ready and to be resilient, there are certain things of mainly common and democratic spaces that need to be set in place. And it's the citizens who comes first, not efficiency, not how fast the cars moves, not how fast the road is, not speed limits, it's people.
Right. So, pandemic or not, but you mean to say the development is on and it's for the people and it starts with the people. So, going to Architect Kukreja, you have always advocated building vertically as one of the ways to manage the space constraints, especially in cities of India like Delhi. Okay, so how does it, can you please elaborate on how does it really help in the space constraints? And also I would like to know another questions related to it, like when we are talking vertical or any kind of thing, accessibility issue is one very important thing. So if you can touch on that aspect as well.
Sure. So, I believe that the approach to go vertical in our cities is a response to the needs of the city. I don't think it is any preconceived design idea that has been generated. We need to realize that land does happen to be a finite resource, and just consuming more and more land by just sprawling the city endlessly has not been the most sustainable or successful way of developing cities. I do believe, and this is some research that we are also trying to do here, is that because I keep talking about land being a finite resource, I know that water on the surface of the earth is a far greater available resource than land is. So I think that's one way to look at where cities can probably in times to come start developing on water as well. But futuristic as it may sound today, as of now, I think it's important that we do go vertical when it comes to development in the cities. But the challenge is that while we go vertical, we cannot afford to lose the characteristics of a good city or a good neighborhood or a good urban environment. And that is what I mentioned about nature or greenery being there. It is about people-to-people interaction. You can't create silos. You have to have buildings which foster interaction between people. So whether it's a residential building or any nature or building typology it might be, The design, even if it is vertical, we have to keep in mind that it allows for interaction between people. And then to the second part of your question, the sustainability aspect, again, there are technologies which take care of the fact that if you are going vertical and you're using resources like elevators or power or electricity or those kind of aspects, you can compensate that with reduced surface area of the buildings, reduce in our kind of climate, particularly, though Anuela also mentioned temperatures going up to 40 degrees. In Delhi can go almost up to 50 degrees. So, reducing the roof heat gain by having lesser footprint or lesser roof print of a building also is a sustainable aspect. So I think sustainability is something where you can't define that these are the 5 ways to make a sustainable building. Sustainability is a vast subject and can have many approaches to it. It's only that we have to remember that our direction is to create a sustainable design. As long as that is there, there are many ways to invent that. So that's my perception of densification of cities.
Okay, so I wanted to add, as the last question, I wanted to add about accessibility issues, the mobility accessibility issues in buildings. How are they getting addressed? Like in 2018, we came to know a report wherein we came to know only 3% of India's buildings are said to be accessible. So what is the status right now, especially in your buildings that you are doing? How is this issue addressed?
That's a very important issue you brought out, that buildings, after all, have to have universal accessibility. Many parts of the world, including in Europe, this has been something which has been in common practice. Yes, India being a country which till a few years back was on a developing quotient, today we are almost reaching that level, but we are still transforming. Our cities are still transforming. Fortunately, the public awareness, which I think is a fundamental aspect to improving the quality of life, that has increased towards universally accessible buildings. So our national building code, that very clearly talks about, we have written codes which we need to follow now to have our buildings having universal accessibility. Besides that, like I said, public awareness has helped a lot also. In fact, again, I'll share today, one of the current news subjects, today's newspaper, talking about how even in the metro, in the Delhi metro, the pictures of which I shared with you, they are now going to be having toilets for transgenders. So it's not, so that direction of moving, I think, is a very welcome step that we are big.
Absolutely.
Universal accessibility in all aspects across society. And that is coming into play. So I know the figures were rather abysmal a few years back. You mentioned a statistic of 3%, but trust me that all the new buildings that are coming across cities in India are now, embracing all these codes and technologies and design interventions to make them universally accessible.
Wonderful, amazing. So I'm glad to know, and I'm sure the audience is also liking the fact that they are knowing this fact from you. So now I would like to call upon Architect Rajendra Kumar to please come forward and give the vote of thanks. But before that, I would like to know if Anuela has any message for India, the architects of India, in fact, and anything that you'd like to share to us.
It's enlightening to know that everybody is working in the same direction. And it's just, to me, it's heartwarming to realize that no matter where we are, we share the same ideas and the same principles about building cities that are for the next century and for the centuries to come. And if some of these things were a little bit avant-garde a few years ago, now it's mainstream, and now we've all realized that we're all in this together. It doesn't matter whether you're in Albania or in India or in Singapore. Those challenges are so similar that they just change in scale and proportionality. But at the core of it, it's developing vertically, creating livable cities, creating public space, and really designing with this business in mind. And to me, it's reassuring that we're doing the right thing. If, so many of us think it this way, then we must be doing it right, and we must be providing for undoing a lot of mistakes that have been done in urban development, in architecture, but not just, but in the way we developed our societies in for the last 50 years at least. So it's been such a pleasure and such a treat to hear from you guys today, and I hope to do this again soon.
And
Very
Vertica, I would just
interesting.
add to that.
Yes, I was going to ask you.
I was just going to say that, we all have been talking so much, not today, but even otherwise, everywhere we are sort of embraced with this situation of the horrors of the pandemic. And we all keep sort of, discussing what all has gone wrong in people's lives. But you know what? Maybe there is a strange silver lining to it as well. Not that we needed a pandemic to make us realize that. Certainly, that's not what I imply. But look at the fact that today we are having this kind of a discussion. We are getting to know about two cities across the world on a platform which till a few years back, or at least even pre-COVID, we would have not imagined would work as a means of knowledge exchange. I believe there are more than 1,000 people who have logged on to this discussion. And I'm from across the globe. There are more than 21 countries that people were clued into for this discussion. Where would we have this kind of an opportunity? So I think we need to pick up the good things from this horrific time that we all have had across the world and take this forward as a means of far more exchange of ideas, thoughts. I've really enjoyed Anuela's presentation, and I'm sure there's so much that we can learn from each other. Incidentally, Albania is one country. Many countries come together or close together on the basis of commerce or political reasons or otherwise. Albania and India share something which Ambassador mentioned in the beginning is a personality. Mother Teresa is a common thread between our two countries. So how people can make the difference. And I think, COVID has also taught that, and this kind of an exchange for me has been extremely enlightening.
Wonderful, wonderful closing, Architect Kukreja. I'm sure Anuela and Aurela, Paul and Architect Rajendra will agree to it. I'm so thankful to both of you for sharing the beautiful closing notes. So may I request Architect Rajendra to please go forward with your vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Vertica, and thank you so much, Dikshu sir and Anuela, for being with us for this wonderful evening. I mean, the Delhi weather is becoming so great. I mean, today we had a very beautiful day, and just to propose the vote of thanks, I believe that I would just like to summarize about the project what Anuela has also shared. Anuela, I just wanted to tell you that I was involved in the research project of Metro Bosco when I was with Boeri. I mean, Boeri is, it's a good friend, and we had, so Metro Bosco project, earlier it was proposed for Milan, but it's such a beautiful project. It is there. So yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that the cities are extending their boundaries and where the natures are becoming a border. I mean, I'm quoting the example of Metro Bosco. Wonderful initiative. And Dikshu Kukreja, I mean, I don't have any word to express his ability. I mean, he and his firm are really making our Indian cities on a very different global map, starting from JNU. Who could imagine like 50 years back, the JNU, the campus which was designed, it's one of the best campus in India, not only in India, but across the world. Your initiatives of a project like a TOD, the Transit Development Project, I am very sure that all the other cities of not only in India, but across the Asian cities are going to learn from your experiences. Before I finally close this session with taking of a name of all the people who are behind the scene, I would like to take one anecdote of my interaction with your Prime Minister, His Excellency Adil Rama. We were in one of the session in Bled in Slovenia. We were President Pahor, the president of Slovenia. He was just saying that the population of Slovenia is increasing a lot. It is becoming 2 million population of Slovenia. I said, Excellency, the population of Delhi itself is at 20 million. So you imagine the scale we are talking about. It as rightly the issue has also mentioned that whether small city or big city, every citizen has an aspiration, and I believe that the cities need to grow, and there are a lot of experiences like what Dikshu in his practice or Anuela with your initiatives are doing. We have a bright future. The technology is definitely going to help us. So with this note, I would like to close this session. I would like to thanks Ambassador Excellency Rahul Srivastava and his office, Mr. Tiwari. Anuela, thank you so much, and your office, Nizada Milani, Vertica, Madhu, Dikshu from Surface Reporter, my colleague from Dikshu Kukreja office, Megha and all team, and last but not the least, Dikshu sir, because I know that how busy you were, and I'm really very sorry for making it a little bit longer than what scheduled for. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much. Very good evening, very good afternoon.